10 of the fantasy football season, and his quarterback sits every matchup. This week, the first one, the Carolina Panthers at the Bears on Thursday Night Football. So Bryce Young, it's been a tough rookie season for him, no doubt about it. And last week, 3 turnovers versus the Indianapolis Colts. And this week, I know it's a good matchup on paper versus a weak Chicago Bear defense. But Bryce Young's not a player I could trust. Obviously, in 2 quarterback leagues or the deepest of leagues, you'll have no choice but to start him, one of your teams in your league. But right now, this week at the Bears, I don't see him doing much. He's a sit. Justin Fields possibly could play in this game. And if he does play, it's a good matchup versus the Carolina Panthers that obviously really can't stop anyone. They're one of the worst teams in the league at 1-7 and possibly the worst team in Fields. We know he was playing good football before he left that ball game a few weeks ago with the thumb injury. So right now, Justin Fields will be a start. Tyson Beckett, if he gets another start this week for the Chicago Bear team, we haven't seen much out of him where you could have confidence in putting him in your starting lineup. So he's a sit. Now, another Germany game Sunday morning. Indianapolis Colts, New England Patriots. Gardner Minshew, he's been a decent fill-in so far for Anthony Richardson in the early going this season. But this week here, traveling to Germany, I don't think a lot of offense we're going to see in this game. Just like we saw with the Dolphins and the Kansas City Chiefs, I thought it was going to be a shootout over there. But obviously only combining for 35 points. So Gardner Minshew versus bend but don't break type of defense, where I think more Jonathan Taylor in this game. He's a sit. Mac Jones a sit for me as well. His weapons are pretty much depleted for the most part, and he doesn't have a lot of help to start with over there. And this Colt defense, they got some ball hawkers, and we saw last week with 2 interceptions of both quarterbacks are sits. Now to the Cleveland Browns, to the Baltimore Ravens, Deshaun Watson, he came back last week, and he had a solid game and a blowout victory for this Brown team versus the Arizona Cardinals. But this week, division matchup, one of the best defenses in the league so far this year, Baltimore's been trouncing teams at home the last few weeks. They beat the Lions in week 7, and then last week beating the Seattle Seahawks pretty bad, 37-3 in week 9. So this week here, Deshaun Watson, it's going to be tough sledding for him. He's not versing a soft defense like the Cardinals, and I have him as a sit. Lamar Jackson, there's some weeks he's going to have monster games, some weeks like last week where it's a blowout game, running game takes over the game. And Lamar Jackson doesn't really have to do much in the defense and running game leading to victory. But every week he's a start is Lamar Jackson. Obviously the best rushing quarterback in fantasy football and pro football. And this week here, even versus a tough defense and a grinded out type of game possibly, he's a start. Green Bay Packers at the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jordan Love, we just haven't seen enough out of him. I know last week he salvaged in the second half of that game, but it's a tough ball game to go into Pittsburgh and versus one of the best defenses in the league, obviously led by TJ Watt. So this week here, young quarterback, tough environment over there in Pittsburgh. He's a sit. Kenny Pickett, we just haven't seen much out of him in his first season and a half in the pros. Here's Kenny Pickett. And he's a tough quarterback, no doubt about it. There's a few times this season with the knee, the shoulder, that I thought he was going to miss the next week's game. But he's played every game as Kenny Pickett. We know he's a tough quarterback. I know he's got decent weapons, Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and you got Harrison Warren out of the backfield. But right now, he's not putting up fantasy numbers, and he's not a player I would have confidence in starting this week. He's a sit. San Francisco 49ers at the Jacksonville Jaguars. Brock Purdy, it's been a bad 3 weeks for him before going into the bye, but I think the Niners will be more prepared. They need this ball game. They know it. 5-3 on the season, 3 in a row reeling off. And Brock Purdy might get Deebo Samuel back in this game. You got Brandon Ayuk, you got George Kittle, who's had a couple pop games over the last few weeks. But this Jacksonville Jaguar team, the best team in the league in terms of creating turnovers defensively. So right now, Brock Purdy, I know he came off a 300-yard a few weeks ago versus the Bengals. But this week he's borderline Trevor Lawrence. He's a start for me. You're going to get anywhere 15, 20 fantasy points from Trevor Lawrence. And we know he's got good weapons. Calvin Ridley, even though he's been up and down. Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, one of the better tight ends in the league. Travis Etienne having a monster season in the backfield. But right now, Trevor Lawrence, he's a quarterback, like I said, after the top 6 or 7 guys. And especially this week with a lot of big names on bye. Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, obviously the top 2 guys on bye week. Trevor Lawrence will be a start. New Orleans Saints at the Minnesota Vikings. Derek Carr and the Saints team, they've been playing good football over the last few weeks. And Derek Carr, he's making plays. His yards are up there this season with 3 games in a row over 300 yards passing. And this week here versus a soft Minnesota defense for the most part, where you saw Taylor Heineke have a solid game. Derek Carr, like I said, you got Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, Taysom Hill in and out of that lineup making plays as well. And Alvin Kamara, one of the better receiving backs in the league. So this week in an indoor game, once again, he's a start. Joshua Dobbs was the hero last week for this Minnesota Viking team. After getting traded from Arizona, obviously he didn't get the start, but Hall left the game with injury, and Dobbs came in and he led this Minnesota Viking team to victory. And to have good weapons like Jordan Addison, to have TJ Hawkinson, definitely an upgrade from where he was in Arizona. And this week here versus the middle of the pack, Saint defense, I like Dobbs as a start. Houston Texans, Cincinnati Bengals. So CJ Stroud took the league by storm. And last week he made a statement, 470 pass yards and 5 touchdowns. So CJ Stroud, he's a top 10 quarterback, I think, remainder of the season in fantasy football. I know this week it's a tougher matchup with a Bengal team that's clicking on all cylinders and going out there winning games. But this week here, he's got great poise. CJ Stroud, 14 touchdowns, 1 interception on the season. And it's going to be a tough game for him, no doubt about it. But after the explosion last week, it's tough to sit a guy like CJ Stroud, especially he's using these weapons to full capacity. Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Dalton Schultz, and even Noah Brown. So he's a start. Joe Burrow, he's a start each and every week. Jamar Chase, we know, is banged up, but I think Chase, even if he don't play in this game, Joe Burrow could take advantage of this young secondary of this Houston Texan team. We saw the Bucs last week pick them apart for the most part. So Joe Burrow, each and every week now, he's a top 5, top 6 quarterback and a start. Tennessee Titans at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Will Levis, he's looked good in his first 2 starts of his NFL career. The football down the field. He's got a great arm. And last week in a tough environment at Pittsburgh, he kept his team in the game till the end. Obviously, I know it didn't translate to fantasy points, really, where he only finished with 8 fantasy points for Will Levis. But like I said, he's got a big arm. It was a tough matchup last week. He kept his team in the ball game, no doubt about it. And he's a start. And Baker Mayfield a start for me. What a season it's been for him. And a great turnaround for him as well here for Baker. So he's a start. Great weapons. Mike Evans, Cade Otton, 2 touchdowns last week. Chris Godwin, Rashad White, one of the better receiving backs out of the backfield. So everything clicking offensively here for Tampa Bay. But their defense really can't stop anyone. But this week here in a pretty good matchup versus Tennessee. And Tampa Bay back home, I got Baker as a start. Detroit Lions at the Los Angeles Chargers. Jared Goff, he's having a great season. And we know he's got great weapons, is Jared Goff. Amon-Ra St. Brown, one of the best wide receivers in the league this season, no doubt about it. You got Jahmyr Gibbs. He's emerged as a big threat out of the backfield, catching the football and running it. Sam Laporta, great rookie year at tight end. And then you even traded for Donovan Peoples-Jones, who I think could contribute to this team. So this week in a potential shootout versus a Charger defense that gives up a lot of fantasy points to quarterbacks, even though we just saw them shut out Wilson and the Jets in terms of getting touchdowns. I got Goff as a start. Justin Herbert, he's been up and down this season, but this weekend a potential shootout and the Chargers back at home. And he's got great weapons. Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler, Gerald Everett will give him some plays at times as well. He's a start for me. Now to the Falcons, the Arizona Cardinals. Taylor Heineke named the starter once again, and rightfully so. At least Heineke could get the ball down the field. He got the ball to his playmakers in last week's tough loss versus the Minnesota Vikings. And this week here, he goes to Arizona. I know it's pretty decent matchup, but still, Taylor Heineke, he's not a quarterback I have confidence in. Obviously, in your 12 or even 14 team leagues, but deeper leagues, he would be a start. But this week, he's probably not going to crack my top 15 in the rankings. Kyler Murray, he's a start for me. I know it's his first game back here for Kyler Murray, but his running ability and this team getting reinforcements, James Conner possibly coming back, got Hollywood Brown, you got Trey McBride, you got Michael Wilson at receiver, you got Rondale Moore, so they got good weapons over there in Arizona. And that's how we have a quarterback this week here. After Clayton Tune last week couldn't move the football at all, it just elevates everyone on the offense. Even though I thought Joshua Dobbs, for the most part, was a solid quarterback for most games for this Cardinal team, but obviously Kyler Murray is better than Joshua Dobbs. So this week, even in a comeback after being out with an ACL from last season to the first 9 weeks of the season, I got Murray as a start versus a middle-of-the-pack defense. New York Giants, Dallas Cowboys, Tommy DeVito most likely going to start, but possibility Barkley could be a starter as the week goes on as well going into this game. But both these guys can't move the football. They're versus one of the better defenses in the league in the Dallas Cowboys. And we saw week 1 the Cowboys beat them 40-0. It wouldn't be surprising to me if this game is a similar type of outcome. Dak Prescott, last 3 weeks, he's putting up huge fantasy points. And pretty much this offense was a run-first offense the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season. And then now Dak Prescott, he's running the football a little bit more. Him and CeeDee Lamb had a talk. And ever since then, CeeDee Lamb's been a top wide receiver in fantasy football. So this week here versus a New York Giant team, I know their defense has improved a little bit over the last few weeks, but Dak Prescott, like I said, he's playing great football. He's not turning it over. They're making explosive plays. Once again, one of the high-powered offenses in the league. And he's a start versus a Giant team. Sam Howell and the Commanders at the Seahawks. Sam Howell, he's been one of the better quarterbacks in fantasy football. And a guy coming out of nowhere. And we know he's got great weapons. Jahan Dotson starting to emerge. Logan Thomas. You got Terry McLaurin. So good weapons on this Commander team. I know they're versus a pretty solid Seattle team like they are at home. But this week, Sam Howell, he's going to be a quarterback once again, cracking my top 10. And he's a gunslinger and a gamer as well, so he's a start. Geno Smith is it for me. I know it's a good matchup on paper versus the Commanders, but Geno Smith really this season's taken a step back and not really a fantasy option. After last year, he was top 12 in fantasy points at the position. So even with a good matchup, I think we're going to see the defense make plays in this game for Seattle, even though I think Howell still will pull up points. And I think we're going to see Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet turn things around. So Geno's a sit. Sunday Night Football, Jets and Raiders. Not much to talk about. Zach Wilson's a sit for me. We haven't seen much out of him this season. He can't even find the end zone as Zach Wilson. And he's taken a lot of sacks. And this Raider defense, believe it or not, the last few weeks has played good football. So he's a sit. Aiden O'Connell, he's a sit for me as well. We haven't seen much out of him. And this New York Jet defense, one of the best defenses in the league. And that's why they're 4-4. If this defense wasn't as good as it is, this Jet team would probably be a 2-6 team right now. But anyway, going into Vegas, this could be a field goal battle between both teams. So they're both quarterbacks. Sits on Monday Night Football, Denver Broncos at the Buffalo Bills. Russell Wilson, I know he's had some good games this season, but this week here, tougher matchup at Buffalo. Even I know a lot of injuries on the defense. Tre'Davious White out for the season. Daquan Jones, Matt Milano. But I still don't think Russell Wilson's going to go out there and put in a big game. And the last game they had was this Bronco team beating the Chiefs. If he didn't throw for the 3 touchdowns, pretty much there was no production out of Wilson, only throwing for over 120 yards. And Josh Allen, top quarterback in fantasy football. It don't matter the matchup. He puts up points. I know turnovers have been an issue for him, but obviously on fantasy points, he overcomes it. That's quarterback start sits every matchup here. Week 10 of the fantasy football season.